Okay, welcome to the Growth Project. Again, if you're just tuning in to us, this is a podcast sponsored by and powered by AMPLOS. We are a performance psychology practice in Greenville, South Carolina. We exist to help you be better and pursue better in your life, to optimize who you are and what you do, and to make sure, as John Wooden says, that you don't get so busy making a living you forget about making a life. This has been a really special series. I think we learned today we can call this a trilogy, right? It is a series, and it has been one of my favorite ones to be a part of. You know, Dr. Drew Brannon is our guest and business partner here. This is a series on 60 Days in the Dark, your journey through detached retinas and loss of vision and loss of being tied to the things that you've been connected to that helps you function throughout life. And so I hope you've been getting the feedback, some of what I've received about how great it has been, not only for me, but for our listeners, for you to share your heart, to share your story. You know, one of the reasons we got into this business, Drew, I think, was to instill hope in others.
Right.
And I've had so many people just reach out to me and say, hey, I had something very similar, or even the exact same thing, and resonated so much with your story about how did you survive? What were your initial reactions? What were those automatic common responses to an uncommon event? And so what are your thoughts and observations of what people have shared with you?
It's been incredibly humbling, honestly, because, I think we started out just with the general intention of like, man, this has been a really unique thing. We should do a podcast about this. And then it simply became, gosh, it's going to be hard to do that in one episode because there's so much to talk about. And then it just took on kind of a life of its own in a way that I didn't have any anticipated, like nothing. I was like, this just seems like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So let's just do it. And I've gotten so many encouraging, thoughtful, kind messages from people about just the fact they've listened and been affected by it.
Yeah, and so I think that's hopefully one piece of advice we have for you, our listeners, that the courage to share your story. You know, as people hear your story, you can't minimize your own pain, but you don't have to carry the burden alone. And being able to share that story not only helps you, but it helps others. And so I hope our listeners are encouraged to share their story, to share their journey, to not have to carry the burden by themselves. And so I hope that's something they can take away from our time together.
For sure.
Yeah, so if you're just kind of tuning in, the first series was, hey, here's what happened. So high level, just set the stage. Somebody's just listening to this. How'd you get to 60 Days in the Dark?
Oh, answer that succinctly?
Succinctly.
Yeah, I guess the short version is I've had a long history of eye problems that were were complicated even worse back in January with a detached retina, which left me without my, at that time, good eye, and then didn't have another eye to fall back on due to a detached retina from way back in the 90s. And so it left me with extremely limited vision for the better part of 2 months.
Yeah. And so that first session was, first podcast was, hey, here's a diagnosis, here's a reaction, here's how you first were responding to these challenges.
Right.
The second one was, as we talked about, God closed one door, he opens another, but it's hell in the hallway. What did you survive? How'd you survive the hallway? How'd you adjust to the changing demands of, hey, what you thought it was and what it became? And I thought it was so powerful. I mean, the hardest thing I think for us to do, Drew, in our profession and in our personal lives is to practice what we preach.
Right.
You know, it's a lot easier to tell somebody to do something versus having to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I was so encouraged to hear that daily grind of, can I just get to lunch? Can I get to that next thing?
Right. Yeah. So that episode was all about just really kind of getting into the weeds of like, how'd you manage it? You know, what'd you do people would ask me, I was like, what'd you do all day? And how'd you manage the emotional and the mental side of it? Because obviously there was no shortage of challenges that came in those categories and departments. And so episode 2 was, I think, just our opportunity to get in and talk about the details of that, of how day in and day out I made my best effort to put together a plan that gave me a shot.
And I think through that all, we know that sometimes other people's intentions, although well-meaning, fall short of helping. And so I think that episode was highlighting, hey, here's what went well and what didn't well. Here's what worked, what didn't work from your perspective, but also from other people trying to help.
Yeah.
And this third one, we're praying the door is closed.
Yeah.
You know, but
that is the scary part, right?
But we know it's not. I mean, even now, I think it's okay for me to say you have a cataract at some point you're going to have to deal with.
Yep, that is true.
Yeah, and the vision is not 100%. There's still some challenges on a daily basis. But watching you on a daily basis, to watch your spirit, to watch your attitude, has really been encouraging and inspiring to me. And so this one, if we had to title this, what would the title of this third one be?
One quick thing though, the vision isn't quite what it was before, but you don't need to be nervous if you see me driving around town. Yeah. Just to put that out there. It's good enough for that.
Yeah.
I got permission.
It's a Ford F-150. Yeah. Clear the way.
Yeah. So this one.
Clear the way.
Yes. So this one is, I think, intended to be a combination of kind of like realizations and lessons.
Yeah.
There's no shortage of reflection time when you live through something like that. And so I obviously had plenty of opportunities to try to put together, just like I just said, realizations and kind of lessons learned. And I do want to, as we get into this, these are always tricky conversations anytime you're put in a position to kind of talk about lessons learned. Because what I don't want to do at all is pretend as though I've kind of like, I got it figured out now, like not even close. So as I'm talking about these things, these are just simply my reflections and realizations that struck me and hit me along the way. And I want to be crystal clear that you and I and every other person listening, like we're all kind of on this path together, trying to figure out life.
And we're all human.
Yeah.
And so just because we maintain or gain a new perspective does not mean we will always act in accordance with that information.
Right.
Especially the brain just wants to throw you back and do what you've always done.
Yeah. This is not pull up a chair and listen to like all the great ideas I have. That's not what this is.
One of the reasons I love you sharing it is because you get to be fully human and share, hey, here's some observations. And I think it's also going to be good accountability. How are you doing with these lessons? And I think even for AMPLOS, how are we doing in honoring some of the perspectives and insights that you gain?
Completely.
Yeah. So let's jump in. Yeah. Lesson number 1.
Yeah. So I got to start with just some hard realizations related to support systems. And none bigger and better and more impactful than Rachel, my wife. And, we talked about this so many times during this saga of, although there have been plenty of experiences in the past of our 22 years of marriage of kind of the in sickness and health part, like we think about this part of our vows. And it was a really, really compelling and strong reminder of the fact that, vows are never you making statements about how you feel. They're statements, you're making statements about what you will do. Yeah. Like the commitments you are making to what lies down the road. And, when we made those commitments to each other 22 years ago, of course we didn't envision this, but the degree to which she became my support system and incredible partner in sickness and health was just staggering to me at times, if I'm being honest. And I really like to see her, because she had to undoubtedly like put her life on hold in some significant ways because I had so many needs. Like I was so helpless and unable to kind of do for myself. So it was a hard time, of course, but in many ways it ended up being just such a profoundly impactful time in our relationship and our marriage. I'd rather not repeat it, if I can be honest. Like one is good for me. But yeah, it was incredible. So when I think about support systems, and there's more I want to say about that, but I certainly want to start with just talking about that and just pointing out the fact that it was so much more than I could have ever asked for in terms of my wife.
Yeah, so a couple of comments on that. One, you were young when you got married, and so you never think about in sickness.
No, of course not. You're in your 20s.
And we think about commitments and really around the concept of marriage. That feeling of what love is at 22 is different than it is in your 40s.
No doubt.
And if you're going to act according to your feelings, it's going to be easy to go do something different. And so I love that observation is, hey, this is what we committed to, and we're going to honor that, although it's not easy in that process. So tough question for you about. Yeah, because, knowing you, knowing Rachel, we think about your complete helplessness almost is what you said. How do you show that love back? How do you show that appreciation? What?
You mean like at this stage of the journey?
Yeah. How do we talk about loving people the way that they feel loved and showing them appreciation. So she loved you in a very
sacrificial way.
Yeah, sacrificial way. And so how do you can't repay that, but how do you say thanks? How do you love her? How do you let her know what it meant to her? What it meant to you?
Gosh, I don't know if I have a great answer for that. I hope that I'm doing that justice thus far, but I don't know. I don't know. I think that I would hope that I could find opportunities and ways to live in a way that's even somewhat as sacrificial. And I hope those aren't new behaviors if I'm doing that. But like, I don't know, man. It was just such a unique time, and there was so much sacrifice on her part. And of course we've talked about it, and of course I've thanked her, but I don't know that I can like adequately repay that, nor do I think she would want that.
Yeah, I just kind of was in that love language thought process. Is like, okay, she loved you very sacrificially, which is what agape love is all about, with unconditional. And I was just thinking, how do we show an appreciation and I think you answered it great, like by trying to love her the same way.
Yeah, I do think that, and this segues into other elements of the support system thing I'm talking about. One thing that became apparent, and she was part of this as well, like, I'm not great at valuing and prioritizing and nourishing support systems like I ought to be. And that hit me pretty squarely between the eyes. And again, you have a lot of time to think, and you hit the rewind button, you go all the way back to like, okay, I've for a really long time, like I've been good at putting my head down and working really hard and functioning in a pretty independent way. I mean, I'm an only child, right? What's one thing we can generally do fairly well is like function independently. Well, the not so great side of that is you aren't always as conscious as you ought to be about how willing and caring and thoughtful people are in terms of like supporting you and caring about you relationally and all that. And it's like you just kind of beating your own drum, and you take some things for granted.
Yeah.
And so as I saw that in my life increasingly, I think my hope is that those are insights that won't leave me.
Maybe she'll listen to the podcast. Maybe that's one. Maybe I'll send her the intro to the podcast. Maybe that will be a profound statement. So as you start being mindful of, it's hard to quit doing, we say all the time, what works for you, and putting your head down, being independent has been ingrained in you for a long time.
Yeah. And
you become mindful of not nurturing the support system, not maybe having the courage to be vulnerable, or just kind of doing it yourself. How has that changed the way you've interacted with others over the last couple of months?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's made me, I think the heavy realization that's come along with that is like, if I'm being honest, my support system has been better than I deserve. And I think what it's helped change and trigger has been an like added measure of sympathy toward others, their struggles, their needs, their challenges, an added hunger and desire to be better in this arena, right? To like, okay, if I think about the classic kind of deposits and withdrawals model there, I've been guilty of probably more greater withdrawals than deposits in some of my support systems. And so I think there's a hunger and a desire to balance that up more effectively, not because of like I'm trying to like hit a certain target, but because I just feel compelled to do it.
Yeah. And so what's interesting, if you've ever heard us talk about growth here, it's awareness, action, and accountability. Yeah. And so as I hear, this is really what is the awareness and insight you have gained? Mm-hmm. What are the actions you're going to create to support it? And then the accountability in the process. And so if we think about transitioning from this first lesson of, hey, loved and served and supported in a way you didn't deserve, well, and you being independent. So the intention was not that you don't care about people, but I think the second lesson prevented the first.
That's a great point. Yeah, thanks for letting me off the hook there a little bit, right? You're softening the blow for me. Yeah, because I wasn't, just the last thing I'll say about that is I wasn't doing any of those things because I was trying to.
Yes.
I didn't really realize I was doing them. I was just kind of living the way that I always had for 44 years with unfortunately limited awareness that there were some elements of that really weren't good. So I've seen that increasingly. And yeah, this is a perfect way to get into kind of talking about the second thing, which is I've lived with a massive unnecessary hurry for a really long time. And it kind of hit me one day, I don't remember exactly when it was in the journey, but I was just thinking, and I was like, why have I been doing that? Like, why live that way? How did it kind of eventually get to that point? And why have I kept doing it? And I think a lot of it came back to, we're never shy about a sports example. So maybe I'll use one of those. But it was the perspective of when you're sitting on the sidelines, you can see certain things that you can't see when you're in the game. And this became a really profound one for me because, we've heard guys talk a lot in sports about how as they gained competency and expertise, they'll use that language of like the game started to slow down. And what that really means is like I'm seeing it differently. I'm seeing things I couldn't see before. And I'm also learning how to just not be affected by certain things that maybe before became distractions for me. Of like, I just see it different. And that's how I started to see things. It's like, look, everyone's playing the game. I can't participate in it right now. And because I couldn't, I could just see things ironically, because I really couldn't see anything. But I was aware enough to begin to put these pieces together and be like, wow, like I'm really missing the mark with some of this stuff.
I do think, I'm being gracious to you today, letting you off the hook. I do think I'm getting ready to use another ironic, no pun intended, hindsight is 20/20. And so with this clarity and perspective to look back on a life and judge yourself from the position you're in now, sometimes can be unfair because a lot of the last 15 years, at least for I've been a part of that busyness, a part of that hurry, and it's easy to say now, well, why am I doing that? Some of what was just out of necessity.
Yeah, there's some truth to that, but I still think that there's probably, well, let's do it this way. So I kind of made up this thing one day. This kind of relates to what you're saying. I made up this thing of, if we can imagine kind of this hypothetical, I'm going to call it the speed and intensity continuum, right? Let's get real technical here. But if you just did a really simple measurement of the speed and intensity with which you conduct your life, and if we do 1 to 5, that's simple. Good luck finding anyone out there who would say I was anything other than a 5. Like I've always been a 5. And I think what I began to realize was that I don't make a very good 5. 5 is not good for me because when I'm a 5, I'm more selfish, more controlling, more impatient, more unsympathetic. There aren't many good things that seem to show up in my life when I'm a 5. And although it helps me to be extremely productive, you hit these things in life where it's kind of like, does that really matter? Like, does anybody really care about that? Is that necessary? Like, is it really needed to be a 5 in order to accomplish A, B, or C, or whatever it might be? Like, why are you doing that? And the more I began to see that, it was like, man, this is bad for me. And I don't know that I want to kind of go forward as a 5.
Yeah.
And then I began to think about like, what about a 4? Like, what is the payoff of functioning like a 4? And I think and it varies for everybody. This is certainly not a conversation telling people what they need to be. But for me, when I'm in the 4th gear, when I'm a 4, the game slows down. So I can see things clearer. I can differentiate things better. I can choose more wisely. I think I give up. I'm 15% slower, but I've got 40% less stress. And I think that makes me a 75% better human.
Yeah.
Which for me is defined as like the degree to which I feel like I'm honoring God with my life. And I'm doing that much better as a 4.
Which I love, like why we do what we do is we believe better people make better leaders and better dads and better moms and better husbands and better employees and better team members and better partners. And so this observation of if I can just downshift just a hair, that I become a better person.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we both believe is an ultimate goal in life. And I love, hey, at that level, I'm able to honor God. I think Mike Pareo shared this with me from Ubi, a quote about it's hard to live in a NASCAR world and keep up with a Savior who walked.
I've never heard that. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and so the busyness and pace with which we live keeps us from being connected to the things and the people that are most important to us.
Yeah. And look, to Rachel's credit, she helped me tremendously with this one throughout this. And I think she's been trying to help me with this one for quite a while now. And I wasn't, what is it? When the teacher is ready, the student will appear, or something like that.
The student wasn't
ready.
Yeah, student wasn't ready.
But I guess in this case, the teacher showed up in the form of some major life circumstance, and I was ready to learn. But I just needed that.
And so again, what have you tried to do differently? I know we're still
so many things. I mean, literally just this past weekend, I'm driving down the road, which again, I'm fine to do that. And I come up to a four-way or to a stop sign, and the cross street doesn't stop, and there's a car coming where I had plenty of time. Like I could have just gone, right? And I would have needed to not like gun it, but not just, glide through the intersection. And I was like, why would I do that? Why does it matter? Like I've got 20 seconds.
Yeah, 20.
It's probably less than that, And now that's just, it maybe sounds like kind of a trivial example, but I've literally just tried to do everything at a slower pace, do less, and try to be particularly mindful and thoughtful along the way of like, okay, what's going on here? Like, what am I bringing to the table? How am I showing up? Am I operating in a gear that I feel like is the right one for me?
Yeah, and so when that fifth gear adds so much stress, and I love the analogy, I can go to that NASCAR. I love, remember Days of Thunder? He's like, hey, you try 50 laps your way.
Yeah.
And you burn out the tires, you try 50 laps my way. We see who's really faster in the end. And I want our listeners to hear them and think about what gear are they in and what's that threshold of speed and intensity. And at what level of stress does it make them become a worse human?
Yeah. And people have to make that decision for themselves. Like there might be some people who are great in fifth gear. I'm just not.
Yeah.
And it's not what's best for me. So I got to be real careful that I don't drift over into that. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that I'm still not, striving for excellence and working my butt off. Like, of course I am. I still get up at 4 a.m. Like that's what I need to do. That's what I want to do. But I can do that and be in fourth gear.
Well, there's a freedom of choice, like versus I can choose to be in fourth gear and operate in the speed versus I have to be in fifth gear.
Yeah.
And I need to be wide open, and I need to be effective, and I need to be efficient. And what I hear is you've taken the pressure off of that expectation of what you have to do, what you need to do, what you should do. And here's the choices. And there's great freedom, Drew, when we make a choice. Here's how I'm going to live my life. I think what's so important for you and so important for AMPLOS, we teach this. We know that our willpower is not strong enough to make the right decision, the best decision every time. So now what I hear you doing is how am I engineering my life in such a way that allows me to live in fourth gear? And I think the challenge for us is going to be at AMPLOS is how do we engineer AMPLOS in a different way that we aren't forcing you to be in fifth gear?
Yeah. Because I really don't know that many people who are in fifth gear who are like really happy. Like you generally don't find that many people who are trying to like recruit to that lifestyle, Like they don't love it. And they might not fully realize what the mode they're in, but I haven't met that many people that are like, man, like this is what you should be signing up for because it is that great.
Well, if we're going to be really honest, look at the areas we operate in. I mean, think about college coaches.
Yeah, right.
What gear are they in?
6.
Yeah, and think about some of the corporations we work with. I mean, and what do we know? There's a really low level of engagement and a really high level of burnout. And being able to one way or another have the blinders removed and see life in a different perspective and see it from the sidelines. And I love the analogy of the game slows down. Can we make decisions and operate with the light that you've received there?
I hope so.
So good.
Okay, what we got next here?
So number 3.
Oh man, this is in sync with this. So this became a big learning thing for me too, of revisiting my notions of the word important. And what I mean by that is that word gets used very casually. And I'm not immune to that. Like I would do the same thing, right? So we toss out this word and we label things as important a bunch, and yet I'm not sure they really are. Like I think we overuse the word important. I think we give our emotion and our time away to things that probably aren't that significant or important, but we call them that use that word and call them important, maybe in an effort to make us feel better about the degree to which we're giving away emotion. But it just got me thinking a lot about like, okay, that thing that's bothering you, why is it bothering you? Should it be bothering you? Is this one of these things that so easily could be just like not ignored necessarily, but just refusing to allow it to be a thing? It's like instead, can we come up with a real short list of the things that are actually important and try to be great at those things, and then have an ability to just let other things kind of like live over here? And that might be a little bit of like a nebulous or ambiguous way of describing it, but that just became in my mind at least a clear way to think about it.
Well, I mean, it isn't a new thought. If you think about we all have our favorite quotes outside, in the lobby, and your quote, is it Jim Elliott?
Jim Elliott, yeah.
What's the quote?
He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, that you're saying this in a different way is like, hey, what are the things that I think are important that really have no bearing on eternity, on my life, on things that are really important?
Right.
And how do I prioritize that? So what have you, we're going to challenge you.
Uh-oh.
What's on your list?
Oh, man. Certainly God, certainly my family. I think the work that I've been given to do while here on earth is vitally important to me. And of course I'm going to leave some things out here and not think of them. Relationships matter tremendously to me. But then I think, and it's not that I've like made a list of things that don't matter. It's not as much that.
Yeah.
I think I hope that I can get better at when those things pop up, whatever they might be, of just kind of being a little bit better at not being affected by them, being able to laugh at them, being able to recognize that in the scheme of things, probably not a big thing. And I think some of that goes back to, how do you live with 40% less stress? You got to do some of that, right? You got to be able to just let some things float on by.
Yeah, I think that goes well, because if you don't have the energy to do you're going to be reactive to everything.
Yes.
And if you aren't kind of in fourth gear where you have some margin to deal with unexpected challenges or opportunities or concerns or people, then you aren't probably going to show up well.
No. And, you do start to get, like we would do this, Rachel and I would do this thing, like, in my backyard, it was try to spend time outside, and so we'd sit on this wall out there in the backyard. And one of the things you figure out real quickly is like they're kind of just all doing about the same thing. Like they're going off to work every day and they're coming home, and then they're doing their best to kind of, if they have kids, to be good parents. And then, they're kind of like, it's just kind of going again and again.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's the machine that keeps on operating. And you see that and kind of just get grasped at over and over again. You're kind of like, wow, like, let's be sure that we are really valuing and maximizing the opportunity. Cause like, it's gonna churn and churn and churn. And one day you're just like, whoa, man, we're on the other side of all that now. And like, whoa, what happened?
There was a friend of mine who said, what do you want people to say about you on your 80th birthday? And as I hear you've talked so much at Georgia football about, hey, values in your family. What are the things we really value? What is our vision? What's really important? What's our legacy going to be? What are they going to say about us? And what do we really want? And as you clarify that, then you know what you're willing to give up to get it.
Yeah.
And I think too many times in life, our values come into conflict.
Yeah.
And when they come into conflict, we don't know how to answer them or what we're going to give life to or energy to. And so we just kind of keep doing the same thing. And that's what I hear you and Rachel pretty committed to is, as we've gained these observations and perspectives, and you guys have had a really tough year, how do we balance being in this world but not of it? And where do we choose to spend our time, effort, and energy?
And so I think it's all that. And then I think too, it's not that, even going back to the comment a minute ago about like the list, I don't know that like my list has changed too dramatically. I think it's more about that just trying to be better. And like, I'm finding it easier to not be bothered by things. Cause like something pops up and I'm just like, okay, Like, it's going to be okay. Because it just doesn't feel that important.
Yeah.
And that's not to minimize or devalue anything. It's just, I'm just seeing some things differently.
Awesome.
Okay. I know we got to keep going here. So next one, talking about kids. Whew, if only we had this one figured out. So the general reflection or realization I had on this was just a reminder, and you've talked about this a ton in prior podcast episodes, of the fact that kids they're always watching, they're always paying more attention to what you do than what you say. We know those to be fundamental truths. And so it just got me thinking about some key questions along the way, such as, what am I teaching my kids without actually teaching them? And what am I saying is important without calling something important? Some of these good kind of like accountability questions that I really got to a lot of these, like the reasons these became realizations for me, is because I just had a ton of time on my hands, which is rare. Yeah. Like we don't really, go meet.
So is this count as your sabbatical?
Yes, that's what someone on our team kind of referenced. But like when in your mid 40s with 3 kids and a career in which you're just trying to do your best, do you suddenly find a lot of time on your hands? Like no one finds that.
No.
And so I'm thinking about, maybe you're kind of demanding the standard around your house. Are you upholding the standard?
Yeah.
Is the way you're living your life making it more or less likely your kids will become who you really hope they're going to become? And like, I don't have great answers for these questions. I just eventually found them to be important ones for me to think about, because I felt like I had this really great opportunity in my life to work through them, think through them, and work on them. And then, all along the way, kind of trusting that in time, I'll come out on the other side of this and I'll have this fantastic opportunity to work on these things.
But what I love about this, like, you didn't waste the opportunity to reflect and think. Like it would have been easy for you to kind of just be stuck in your misery instead of using some time that you didn't waste of asking some meaningful questions that are really hard answers. And I think the questions you're asking about our kids is what we ask our coaches, is what we like, are they winning because of you or in spite of you?
Right.
And are you asking them to do things you aren't willing to do or you aren't capable of doing? And I think it's so easy to do that as a parent or as a leader.
I try. I mean, I did think I about drove Rachel crazy there for a while, because I kept being like, hey, can you write this down for me? Like, write this down. Just put this somewhere. I got to be sure I don't lose this. I think she got a little tired of that. But I tried. But hey, let's be clear. There were some days I did 0 of that. Yeah. Absolutely 0, because I was too down, frustrated, you name it. Yeah. Didn't do any of it.
Well, I think I'm glad you mentioned that, because some people can hear this podcast like, I shouldn't waste a moment to think. And this pressure, I need to be more like Drew. And when I'm like, hey, Drew didn't handle this perfect.
No.
But here's some things you can do when you're faced with something that's unexpected and unpredictable and uncontrollable.
Okay, let's hit this last one. So the last one is, and we've talked about this too, and there's research behind this, but I don't know that I've ever lived a more profound example of that than this one that I've just lived through. And that is, like, when we think psychologically and we'll use language such as this, I'm at the end of my rope, or I'm on my limit, or I can't go any further. Whatever version of that you dial up, it isn't true. Like, whenever you think you are literally like at the threshold of like, I got nothing left in the tank, you do. And I lived that several times through this of like, man, I mean, the most disheartening one, of course, was when I kind of had finally gotten a little bit of a foothold after my first surgery and thinking that, okay, I'm getting there, right? No, you're not. In fact, you're going to have another surgery. You're going to have to start all over. And this one's going to be about 4 times as long in terms of recovery standpoint. And, it's like, okay, I don't know if I can do that, but here I am, right? And so this is not by no means a story about like any one person's hero story. It's just a matter of like, I think we all have to be aware of that, is when you feel like there's just nothing left, there's more in there somewhere.
And I think that the human spirit and the human will to keep on going, we talk so much, especially for me as a cognitive psychologist, that we often set limits on ourselves by how we think.
For sure we do.
And to me, that Ephesians 3:20 from a spiritual perspective says, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine. And in my Bible, I have written beside that, no limits, no regrets. And my interpretation, Drew, is who am I to set a limit on what God can do in me, through me, or for somebody else? And so when you hit your rope and so like, I can't do that, how did you quickly get back to, you know what, I can?
Yeah, I don't know that it was, there probably wasn't just like, this is the thing I did, but it was probably a combination of things. I mean, it was back to what we talked about in episode 2 with thinking about like that passage in Exodus 16. That was profoundly important for me throughout, thinking about manna.
Yep.
I think goes back to support systems. The fact that somebody was probably there to come see me, or Rachel was doing something to, I mean, she's got such great instincts as a wife of like being able to quickly pick up on kind of where I am emotionally. So there's no doubt that she played a huge role in that. It was probably just a combination of things, honestly, because I was in those moments, I just needed someone or something to kind of like pull me up out of the depths.
And I think that's how you started. Number one was today is, hey, I live so independent.
Right.
And like, you can't keep going without somebody encouraging you. Right?
I couldn't.
We all need somebody in our life to believe in us, to encourage us, to challenge us, to meet us where we are, to help us keep moving forward. I think in your role in the last 60 days in your life, different people have played that role at different parts.
No question.
And I think what I would take from that, Drew, is for all of us, there's somebody that we know and love right now who are struggling today.
Who needs something, yeah.
And I would encourage, if that person pops up in your life, send them a note, call them, drop by, encourage them, share something with them, because you never know what that could be what they need in that moment to keep going forward because they've hit their limit.
But most people don't do that very well in fifth gear.
No.
I can promise you that.
No.
And I've been good at cautioning people about that historically.
About what?
About not living in fifth gear, maybe not using that language, but just making the point of like, if you're going 1,000 miles an hour, it's difficult to be gracious and thoughtful.
Yeah.
So
again, it's easier. We've made a living out of telling other people what to do. It's easier to do it, to say it, than to do it.
Yeah. So I think that, that was I can see it clearer now than I could then about the fact that like at each and every moment where I or any other person feels like, it's kind of, I'm on the limit, right? It's like, you're not. But the way to push through that is to just literally like be in that moment to the best of your ability. So that was a big thing. And, I feel like kind of where I am now is, these are just, we just kind of talked about 5, what I would call realizations or lessons. Trust me, there's plenty others. And it just becomes this kind of reflection mode you get into as a human where you think, okay, wow, this was really important and valuable and impactful. What I don't want to do is see it go to waste.
Yeah.
It's like, no, don't do that. Like, don't do that. And that's kind of been the biggest thing that's on my mind, or has been on my mind more recently, and which is not easy to do, right? Because you come back from being out for so long and you have this internal energy and excitement about being able to be back into a lot of the elements in life that you couldn't do for a long time. And that's good and healthy and important. But yet you don't want to get back to fifth gear.
No.
Because these we
aren't going to first gear, are we?
I don't have that gear.
Okay, good.
It's funny. The whole time I was thinking about this, I was going back to this is what I was driving when you met me. The '89 Corolla 5-speed. It was maroon, and
you needed to be in fifth gear in that car.
The problem with fifth gear in that car was when you drove in fifth gear in my Corolla, you thought the vehicle was going to just fall apart.
Yeah, that's a great
driving down the interstate. It was a little unnerving.
Yeah. Back to that no regrets piece, when we've said it over and over, the research suggests you're into your life, you're going to regret what you didn't do instead of what you did. And so I hope we can help provide some accountability to you. I hope I can incorporate, like I'm a fifth gear guy, I think, as well, that we don't look back and regret, as I started this, that we got so busy making a living that we didn't make a life.
Right.
And I love hearing the language you use. Hey, in fourth gear, I'm a better human.
Yeah, for sure. According to the people that seem to care a lot about me.
And the people that matter most.
Yeah, that too.
So final thoughts, observations, we wrap up the trilogy of 60 Days in the Dark.
No, I think that, first of all, massive thanks to you, not just for the expertise and mastery in driving this conversation, but you were certainly one of the people in the support list corner, as you well know, in many different capacities. And I just think that if I guess the one ask I would have would be, we have gotten a lot of, I think a lot of people have listened to these podcasts. I'm thankful for that. And so my ask would just be to try to put your finger on one thing that maybe you heard in these conversations and focus on it. Yeah. And because it could, think about the impact. Like if all the people that have listened to these conversations, if every person tries to find one thing, just one, that they really are going to focus on, what a cool result that would be.
Yeah. What a world it would be.
Yeah, maybe.
That, hey, better people create a better world. So we're thankful for you, your journey, and the hope that exists is palpable. We can feel it in the office, and we can feel it in this podcast. And appreciate you sharing your story, because it's one of hope, it's one of faith, it's one of perseverance, it's one of grit. And those are all the qualities I would use to describe you, even in fourth gear. So that's a good challenge for us. Again, on this podcast, if you have any questions, thoughts, feedbacks, if we can encourage you or help you, please reach out and please give us some feedback. And share this with people that you know and love. So, Drew, thanks for telling your story.
Hey, my pleasure to do it. Thanks so much to you.
Yep.
All right, take care, everybody.